Hi everyone, this class is for Wednesday the 22nd of September. Just to start off with a couple of announcements. Homework number 5, remember the due date for that one has been pushed back to 5 p.m. on Friday, and the purpose for the extension is just in case you want to ask a couple of questions related to the assignment. I do give you a couple of hints in today's lecture, and so hopefully that'll help you out as well. Then looking into next week, we have homework number 6 due on the same day as our first midterm exam, Wednesday the 29th of September. So this recorded lecture is for Wednesday, and we're going to be back in class, in person, at our normal time and location on Friday. And so we'll take Friday and Monday of next week to spend a little bit more time talking about the exam so that everybody feels prepared. Today is a continuation of the techniques that we can use to apply the present worth method for decision making. Remember that when we're comparing alternatives, that's where we go into analysis mode, and we're trying to identify which alternative will be most profitable to a company. And in the last class meeting, we went over the least common multiples approach, which is used when projects have a different lifespan from one option to the other. The two techniques that we'll be learning in today's class meeting serve the same purpose, those situations when option A and option B, for example, last over a different number of years. And so for us to compare them in a reasonable way, we have to make them both last over the same study period. So that's what today's lecture goes over. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a little bit of homework hints here at the beginning, and then the rest of the class meeting was recorded in a previous semester. So if you have any questions, please feel free to give me an email, or you can call me on Teams. And with that, I'll see you back in class on Friday.
All right. So at the top of the homework assignment, I give you a link and some instructions related to properly annotating a spreadsheet solution. And that is just, how to put good notes in the spreadsheet so that the grader can easily find your work and understand it. So the first problem and the second problem and the first two problems, you're going to use the approach that we talked about in class last time, the LCM approach. And then problems 3 through 5, it only has 5 questions. 3 through 5 are related to techniques that I'm going to share with you today. And the problem that we discussed previously was we can't compare two alternatives that have a different useful life. And so does anybody remember what we did last time to make it so that both of these options did have the same useful life? Feel free to chime in with your microphone or type in the chat box there. What was the technique we used last time? All right, the LCM approach. And what does LCM stand for? Like, what, in essence, are we doing? Like, what's the technique to make it last, to make both options last the same number of years? So LCM stands for least common multiple. That's correct. And what are we doing in the least common multiple approach? Oh, the silence is awkward. So awkward. Find the highest PW. That is the decision criteria. So you've got it correct that that's how we choose between option A and option B. But how do we make them both last the same number of years? Dividing the cash flow into sections. Josie says multiply the years by the LCM. Okay, good. Taking LCM of A values to produce an even comparison with the sections. The key word that I hope you'd understand is that we're repeating the cash flow diagram. Repeatability is we're saying let's, for option A, have another cycle of the same thing where we're going to buy option A a couple of times so that the end of those cycles is the same number of years as the number of cycles we run for option B. So like the key word here is repeating. And so we get it, there are a different number of years right now. And why is that a problem? It's a problem because the Amount of money matters, but so does the timing of the money. And so you can't compare two pieces of equipment that last a different time frame because their revenues exist in different time frames. And so the way that we have a true apples to apples comparison is to make sure that we're comparing the present worth of each option, and we're picking the one that's the highest present worth, but that we're doing it for two options that last the same duration. And so LCM was, let's repeat. All right, so here's a trivia question for you. Does anybody remember what I mentioned is some of the common mistakes that students will sometimes make when applying the LCM approach? What's a common mistake when taking the original cash flow diagram and repeating it? I only emphasize this simply because I don't want you to make that mistake. Josie says not buying the thing in the right year, and that's correct. So a lot of students would be tempted to, and Craig's got the other one, a lot of students would be tempted to do the purchase in year 7. But remember, if you do the purchase in year 7 for option A, then that means that the revenue doesn't start until year 8. So you actually need to buy it at the end of the 6th year so that it's available through the 7th year and the revenue comes in at the end of the 7th year. So remember to purchase the item so that you have continuous access to the equipment. And then Craig's point is that you don't want to buy it again in year 18. Because if you bought it again in year 18, now you've got 6 years of use ahead of you. And then if you bought the item again for option B in year 18, then you've got another 9 years and you're out of sync one more time. So you got to make sure that they both terminate and then you don't have equipment anymore after year 18. And that's what we want to do. We want to have the years last the same amount of time. So LCM is one tool we have to make the cash flow diagrams the same length. There are some other techniques that we can use to make the cash flow diagrams the same length. And they might even be simpler than repeating, now that I think about it. One option for making these, if you think about it, what's wrong with option A is it's too short. What's wrong with option B is it's too long. Like if we're just thinking in terms of making it easier to compare them. So we can terminate both at 6 years, and that's called early termination. Before we talk about early termination, let's look at contract services. And so we can either make the one that is short a little bit longer, or we can make the one that's too long a little bit shorter. So the first thing that I'm going to suggest is what the contract services allows us to do is we take the short one, option A, remember only lasts for 6 years, but we say we're going to go rent the equipment for 3 years. Instead of buying it, let's lease it, rent it, or find a contractor to come in and operate the equipment on our behalf. In other words, we'll buy the item and it will run its normal life of 6 years, but then for year 7, 8, and 9, what we're going to do is we're going to pay $4,000 a year to have the equipment made available to us, and then we'll still have that same revenue that we've always been able to receive for having the equipment in service. And so then it ends at the 9th year, and that's the same as option B. So now we can compare these two alternatives. So an equivalent item is being leased is the essence of contract services. And because that being the case, now they both end with 9 years. All right, so here is the first part of today's in-class exercise. I hope you've got those printed out. And so what we're going to do is we're going to compare option A and option B. We've said we originally had that shorter cash flow diagram. And so some item is available for us to lease, and we're going to do that. So both of these go through 9 years. And so which alternative is better is what I'd like you to analyze. We have the 4% table that's going to be applicable here because it tells us in the cash flow diagram that we have an applicable interest rate of 4%. So we need to be able to see through the 9th row here. Let me just zoom out so we can see all of the data that we need. I need to zoom out a little bit further. All right, that ought to do it. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second, and it's going to be pretty easy for option B, right? All we have to do for option B is a P/A, because we've got an annual series here. So take it to the present, combine it with the initial cost that's already at the present. Option A is going to have that step and also an intermediate series of steps that we'll have to take to get the lease cost back to year 0. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what that is, but we've done it before, how you turn this annual series, which right now is in year 7, 8, and 9. We need to get that amount to year 0. We can't do it in one step. It's a 2-step process. So I'll pause for a second. You dust off those calculators and use the provided cash flow table, the factor table, to find out the present worth of both options. Which one is best? All right. So option A is the tricky one, right? So what you can see is that I've put in this hand-drawn arrow, and what that represents is I took the annual series in year 7, 8, and 9, and I can't just do a P/A and take it all the way to year 0, because the standard form of a present value coming from an annual series is that that amount, that single amount, is going to be 1 year before the annual series begins. And so the P, the so-called P with air quotes, because it's really a quasi-present value, is going to be in year 6. And then I'll take it from year 6 to year 0. All right, so this is saying the present worth at A is the 11,500 that's already at time 0, and it's an outflow, so that's why there's a negative sign there, plus the $5,000 per year revenue. So the revenue side of the cash flow diagram can be taken immediately to the present because it's a continuous annual series every year from 1 through 9. So I'll do a P/A at 4% interest, n equals 9, and that will be, that factor that I look up is going to be multiplied by 5,000. And then this last step, minus, because it's on the bottom side of the cash flow diagram, it's an outflow. What I'm saying is, first we will multiply the amount by the factor that finds present given annual, and then I'll multiply the amount by the factor that finds present given future. So this amount at year 6, which I just previously have been thinking of as a present value, in reality it's a future value. It's a single amount at year 6, and I need to take it to year 0. So I'll do find P given F, 4% interest, n equals 6. All right, so I'm multiplying it by 2 consecutive factors. I'm multiplying it by the find P given A factor, and then I'm multiplying it by the find P given F factor. So before rounding, I get that the sum of the present worths of that option is $16,903.85. But then if I look at these factors, one of them only has 4 digits. And so then I'll round off my answer to the nearest 4 significant figures. And so that's 16,900. All right, so option A had that 2-step conversion. Option B is a little bit simpler because we can just do that direct. Find P given A of this 4,100 in revenue each year. So I've got the factor multiplied by the amount, and I kind of indicate what is the present value of the revenue before combining it with the cost that's already at time zero. And the present worth of that alternative is only $14,285. And since my factor had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits in it, then I can have my final answer accurate to 5 digits as well. So that's why in this case I didn't round off to the nearest $10, but I was able to predict to the nearest dollar what the present worth is. So which option should we select? Whichever one is going to give you the most profit. You know, that's what this company is in business trying to do, is generate profit. So option A has a larger present worth. We've discounted everything at the MAR. The MAR was 4%. And so what this says is that even if you had to take out a loan to buy the equipment, and if you were paying 4% interest to the lending agency, then you'd still have profits on top of that. And if this was self-financed and you were providing the upfront funds yourself rather than borrowing them, then it would be just that much more profitable. All right, so any questions about contract services? The general idea, remember, is that we lengthen the cash flow diagram that's too short in contract services. All right, so that's contract services. Early termination is a little bit different. So you remember by now we've looked at these two options enough times. Option B is the one that lasts for 9 years ordinarily. Option A is the one that only lasts for 6 years. So in contract services, we lengthened option A. In early termination, we're going to truncate option B. So truncate means we're going to make it shorter. And so look at those dashed lines. What it means is the revenue that we would normally get in year 7, 8, and 9, we're going to forego that revenue because what we're going to do is sell the equipment early. Rather than just use it until it has no residual value, we can take option B, whatever it is. It could be a computer equipment, it could be manufacturing equipment. It has some residual value because it could be used for another 3 years. And so there's a secondary market where people will pay to buy that item. And so the green arrow here doesn't represent the present value of the revenue. It does not represent the present value of this revenue. It represents the salvage value of the equipment. So in other words, those two things may not be the same. You know, depending on what the secondary market values your equipment at, that is going to be the length of that green arrow. It is not the present worth of the revenue. So the idea with early termination is we sell the equipment and just get a one-time lump sum amount from that sale rather than continuing to operate it in the years afterward. Okay. So here is the second part of today's in-class exercise, and what you need to do is find out which alternative is better, option A or option B. And what this table is meant to illustrate is if you sell it after, well, you initially buy it for $16,200. So if you sold it the very same moment that you bought it, you could get all of the value back. But then if you sell it after only 1 year of use, then its resale value is $14,400. And you can see the trend is the longer you own the equipment, the lower and lower its resale value becomes. That trend is called depreciation. When equipment is losing value, the older and the more used it becomes. That's the depreciation of its value. So in our case, in order to compare the two options, then what you need to do is you need to terminate option B early. Okay, so I want to see if you can figure out how to use this table in order to compare the two options according to the early termination approach. And then it says here, and I equals 10%. Notice that. So in I think the previous example we were using the 4% table, but this time we want to use the 10% table. So let me bring that 10% table up onto the screen in case you don't have it handy there at home. You'll be able to see it on the screen. All right. Yeah. All right, so everything is on the screen that you need in order to solve this example. I'll pause for a moment, let you do the calculations. We have plenty of time, so I'm not going to rush and start revealing the solution until I feel like you've really had a chance to work with this one on your own. All right, well, the suspense is probably killing you, so let's pull up the solution to the second one here. All right, that's blurry. All right, so we've got option A, which is too short, and option B, which is too long. And for early termination, we're going to make it so that option B terminates after 6 years. And so we're going to sell the item at the end of the 6th year. So the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 6th year. If we go over here to the table, at the end of the 6th year, the resale value is $5,400. So that's not the same thing necessarily as if we had found the present worth of that revenue in years 7, 8, and 9. So we just go to the table and find out the resale value. So what that means is for option A, we simply have to find P given A at 10% for 6 years, and whatever that table lookup factor is, we multiply it by 5,000, and then that gives us the present worth of the revenue, and then we combine it with the cost, which is already at year 0 and is in the amount of 11,500. So from the table, we look up the factor. Now, by the way, I know it can be tempting to save time and save space on your paper and save valuable, precious pencil lead, but I think it's really a good idea to take this step-by-step approach and take the time to write out what is kind of the basis for the factor number that you've got written. You know, like if you just write the number itself and you happen to be wrong, you're not going to get as much partial credit as if, for example, in the earlier step, if you had written it out more completely, and if you write P/A, then even if you go to the wrong row in the table or write the wrong number, at least if you wrote this part of it, then the grader would know, oh, well, at least they recognize it's a find present given annual. So the whole purpose of your written solution is to demonstrate comprehension and to kind of explain the process of how you came to your final answer. And so it's really valuable for you to document that in as much detail as you can. You know, maybe you could have done the calculation strictly in your calculator and, you know, just write PWA equals 10,276. You know, maybe you don't have to write it down, but I can't see inside your calculator, especially in like a virtual situation like this. And so it's really incumbent on you to make your solution thorough and expansive and show the logical flow. And so here what we have is the present worth of the revenue is $21,776. The cost, which is already at the present, $11,500. So that's how we get this $10,276. And it looks like I have not yet rounded that off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you know, in a final answer, need to round that to the nearest dollar. All right, so option B, I'm going to do find P given A on that $4,100, which we have 6 years worth of it, and then find P given F of the single $5,400 amount. Okay, so here is the structure for that one. And the structure is find P given A for the 4100, find P given F for the 5400, and then there's already the present value cost at year 0. All right, so option A is better. We would choose option A. So now if we go back to the homework and just show you how this applies to the assignment that's coming up. There it is. So option 1, you're going to do early termination because one of the option 1 you're going to do repeatability because it lasts for 6 years for one of the options and the other one is 9 years. Option 2 is another one that's also pretty suitable for the LCM approach. You know, we can repeat. We've got 12 years for one of the options, 6 for another, and 3 for the last. Okay. In question 3, it says to use contract services. And so you know that if it's contract services, what you're doing is you're lengthening the cash flow diagram that would ordinarily be too short. And since it's a complicated word problem like this, even if it doesn't tell you you have to write the cash flow diagram, it's a pretty good idea to put it down on paper. It's always worth sketching out the cash flow diagram just for you to get a graphical sense of what's the revenues, when are the revenues, what are the costs, and so on. So I suggest it's a good idea to draw the cash flow diagram. Contract services for question number 4, and then finally early termination is what you're going to use for the last problem. So it's shorter than your last assignment was. Any questions related to today's in-class exercise or the material in general? All right, Ethan points out that on one of the homework assignments it says to use 4.5%, but you don't have a table for it. And so what that implies is that you're going to need to use the equation method rather than the table lookup method. Or, yeah, Excel makes it easy as well. Yeah, so the formulas that you can always use if it's like an odd number like that. Let me go back to where I've showed you that previously. Here we go. Yeah, this table of equations will allow you to solve for the factors for whatever the interest rate is. But then in the specific case of that question, I think using Excel will make it pretty easy to solve that problem. Now, if you do use Excel, you don't have to. Sometimes the problems specifically tell you you must use Excel. Sometimes I don't tell you either way. And so if I don't tell you either way, you can use whatever method you prefer. But if you do use Excel, please follow these tips and suggestions related to providing notes and annotation and like kind of a clear structure to your solution. I said in a previous class that it's not the grader's responsibility to go in and hunt for the right answer in your spreadsheet. It's your responsibility to make the right answer impossible to find. Make it bold, highlight it in yellow, underline it, put a box around it, make your answer to the question really stand out from the rest of the calculations that'll be in the spreadsheet. All right, well, that's all I have for you today.